Life on Earth is wonderful and varied and fascinating, but it can sometimes seem pretty messy. Food goes into one end of an animal, the animal extracts what it needs, and then leftovers come out of the other end. And we see that as waste, but microbes and bugs and beetles don't, they eat it, and there's a message there. This isn't waste, it's a resource. So what if you could use that to do things? What if we could use that to do things? Could you perhaps use human urine to power a phone? Could you use other human waste to power a robot? Well, this isn't just science fiction, and today we're going to be meeting the scientists who are making both of those things and far more true. Welcome to Fully Charged. This is the University of the West of England, the home of the Bristol Bioenergy Centre. They started here a few years ago making a robot that was fuelled by sugar, and the idea and the lab have just grown and grown since then. This is the story of the microbial fuel cell, which is this amazing collaboration between nature and human engineering. And I'm here to meet Professor Yannis Yiropoulos, who is making this a reality. It's just such a lovely idea that you can get microbes to cooperate with an electric circuit, to plug them into electricity in that way. But of course, microbes need to be fed, and one of the reasons that this lab gets so much attention is because of what they feed the microbes. Because they don't just pop down to Sainsbury's and get them a sandwich. They feed them this, and what this is urine. So why would you put urine in a fuel cell?
Well, first of all, urine is abundant, is ubiquitous, and it's actually quite a good resource for these microbes. It's a very good feedstock. It contains all the right ingredients. If it's used fresh, it's got the right temperature and the right pH. So in a fuel cell world, that's quite a good combination of parameters we would have for an inflowing fuel.
And when it comes to how much energy you get out, what sort of voltages and currents are we talking about? How much useful energy can come out of this process?
So the best that we can ever produce from a microbial fuel cell is 1.1, right. 1.14 volts. This is without anything connected. This is the so-called open circuit voltage. So at best, when producing work, this thing will produce roughly half a volt, 0.5 right. volts. That's why we've been thinking about this kind of modular approach, which consists of a number of these microbial fuel cells connected together that then allows us to step up both the voltage and current parameters, and therefore we step up our power output, which we can then use for real purposes.
So the idea here is that you've got something that is quite small and quite simple, and that'll produce a little bit, but because it's so small and so simple, you could just have lots and lots and lots of them.
Exactly.
And then you can deal with volume. Now, when it comes to the practicalities of what you can do with the power output here, I notice in your lab just there is something that looks very like a urinal.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So that's our live demonstration unit. It's one that we have had running consistently for about 3 years now. And it's a way of showing how we can simplify the process of introducing this technology into everyday life. And so that urinal is an example of how we can marry together clever electronics, energy harvesting electronics, with a single module, still the same half a volt output, but it consists of several of these 2 milliwatt microbial fuel cell ceramics. But we can then power things like mobile phones, we can power lighting, and other things that we would be using in everyday life.
And so that one charges a mobile phone?
That one charges a mobile phone. We initially started with a brick phone that no one would be using these days. And one person's single visit to the loo, which would be the equivalent of about half a liter of urine, over a complete 24-hour period is what was required to fully charge the brick phone. Now, it's a brick phone, so it's small battery, small capacity, and therefore it was doable in a day. When we then investigated how much would be required to charge a smartphone that people would be using, then it took 84 hours to charge from completely empty flat battery all the way to fully charged whilst the mobile phone was on.
All sorts of things in nature have inspired engineering. You know, you can go back to Leonardo da Vinci looking at birds and thinking about the first flying machines. And even mundane things like Velcro were invented after humans looked at those little burrs that you get stuck to your trousers after a country walk. And nature was right in there at the beginning of electricity as well, because in 1791, Luigi Galvani discovered what he called animal electricity by looking at frogs' legs. And he didn't understand it, and it was actually a debate with Alessandro Volta that led Volta to build what was one of the first batteries in order to understand what that animal electricity was all about. They knew that electricity was part of life, but they didn't really think of that explicitly. And then the two kind of got separated. And of course, now we know that nature has electrical systems built into it. They are part of everything. And what I love about this research is that it brings that all back full circle. So nature and our electrified world join together, and we see it as one whole thing. So the mechanism that you have chosen to use for this is this concept of a microbial fuel cell. And normally when we think about a fuel cell, we think about hydrogen. You know, it's this very it's chemistry and physics. Nobody mentions biology.
Yes.
And you've got biology in there. So first of all, just explain to us what a fuel cell is. We've got the proper academic board, so you can draw a diagram, and then show me where the microbes go in all of this.
Oh, excellent. These are naturally occurring microbes, which would be, they are known as ferry reducing or iron reducing, sulfur reducing organisms. These are natural minerals that are found in our natural environment, and they would be the equivalent of the electrode that we provide the microbes in here. So the natural habitat for these microbes are these underground or underwater environments or sediments where these minerals are the substratum the microbes will colonize and perform the natural kind of cycle of biotransformation. So it is exactly along those lines that we're kind of providing that substratum here, but in a controlled manner and part of a circuit, so that electron transfer process, which happens everywhere, we're able to capture that and channel those electrons so that we have current produced.
It's such a clever system. It's such an elegant way of doing it, but I can see it's very hard to realise in practice. But when it comes to amounts of energy that come out of this, because we think of, you know, microbes, these tiny little things we can't see, you know, sugar water, for example, it's got a bit of sugar in it. Is this any good at extracting energy, basically?
Well, I am biased, yeah. So I will say it's probably the most efficient way of extracting energy. But it's the fact that we're still trying to work an efficient system around it to be capturing that energy. That's part of the challenge. The microbes, they've been reported to be as much as 96% efficient.
That's huge.
It's enormous.
Well, I love this idea that you're building a little house for microbes. Yes. So we've got an example of a little house, two of them here. So tell me about these.
So in fact, this is more, that was at the beginning of when the field started to grow. For lab study, it's very nice. It does look like yeah. a little house, but in terms of practical implementation, it was yet quite limiting. We had, for example, membranes in the middle. That was costing a fortune. That comes from hydrogen fuel cell, because that's where we started
fuel cell technology.
That's fuel cell technology. But at £100 a square meter,
Wow.
If you need 1 cubic meter of those things, it was too expensive. So that's why we went for new, cheap material. So that's what we were doing at the time, replacing a flat surface with another flat surface.
So that just looks like the terracotta you would make a plant pot from. I assume it's a bit more complicated.
So this is the terracotta from which plant pots are made, indeed.
It's the same stuff?
Yeah, or the roofing.
Wow.
So we literally went for that and tested it, and it happens to be that it works better than
your posh, expensive stuff.
Yes, much. And that's the thing. That's what we learned through the process. We are dealing with complex life, with a lot of things happening inside, and in fact, they need to exchange more than just protons to operate properly. It allows a lot of things to seep both ways, and that's what the organism needs.
Right.
So it was great. So we've already reduced the cost, so that means, yes, we can bring this closer to the field. But yet it was difficult to create a chassis, it was bulky, and one of our colleagues said, but what about inversing the system and go for round and circle? And that's why we are now working with this concept of ID where the membrane is the structure,
right,
where the fluid is going to pass through the sides in a container. And this time we're growing, in fact, enabling the microorganism to grow on something that is hanging like roots.
Yeah.
And we have the cathodes inside.
So basically you can lower that down into your fuel.
Yes.
And then it will produce electricity.
That's what we've done with this one. So
back here.
This one, for example, has an accumulation of all of those. So therefore we can multiply the energy we want to have and also the treatment efficiency. And if they are happy, they grow and they feed well. So if we've done our job properly, we get high current, high electricity generation, and a proper treatment. Because if they don't feed properly, the waste doesn't get treated properly.
A ceramic microbial fuel cell, including the electrodes around it, we've now got it down to £1 and a bit less than that as a prototype. And again, the human kind of input into this is just to be consistent, is not considered. But it's a huge difference between the two, and this is very much more available and much easier to make. This is actually handmade. You can see.
Oh, really? I can see it's a bumpy on the surface.
Exactly. So this was, I think, we used like a permanent marker as the mold to kind of roll around it. So it's very simple and quite robust.
But that's important, isn't it? Because that means it can be produced in places that don't have access to sophisticated manufacturing.
Exactly. And in fact,
facilities.
when we were in one of those places and field trialing the larger scale peak power, we were engaging with some of the local community who were producing ceramic products as part of their business. And therefore they had the skill set to produce ceramic parts for microbial fuel cells. So that's part of the work that we're doing. In addition to introducing the technology, it's also giving the technology to the community, but owning the technology. So not only being given a ready-made technology that they can then maintain, people can then maintain, actually building the technology in country and then deploying it. So it's really important to be simple, and it's really important to be robust and low cost. Because in principle, microbes, they don't die. As you said earlier, they multiply continuously. So as long as there's food coming, the same community of microbes will continuously grow. And that process being continuous will actively drag things across so it doesn't get clogged up. So in principle, it lasts for a very long time. But there is an experiment in the wet lab which has been running continuously for 13 years now.
13 years? 13
years. And that is the proof positive that we have, that these microbes on those electrodes in that kind of environment, as long as they're provided with the feedstock, they will continue operating.
I'm realizing that when I ask the question, there's an assumption that in our human world, the way we make things run out. But in principle, if humans were interfering, nature just keeps going. So why can't we create engineering which just keeps going?
Absolutely. And this is what sustainability or sustainable engineering should be about. But it is a mindset change. It is a cultural change that we're introducing. And it's not just here, it's everywhere in the world. And you're absolutely right. We've been brought up to think that things have an end of life, and then we get rid of them, and we pollute even more our landfills by getting rid of the very recalcitrant materials that we have in our manufacturing processes. But in reality, they shouldn't. If we're understanding our natural environment a little bit better, and we're working better with some of the biological components that are available to us, then we can have processes, just like natural processes, that they never run out. It's a cyclic process. It's not perpetual. Of course, there's input and output, but it's a recycling process. It is a biotransformation process, and there are ways of utilizing every stage of those processes.
So there's two things here. You're getting electricity out, but you're also changing what goes in to something that's better that comes out.
So yes, the idea is if we just take general numbers, in the UK, 2 to 3% of the electricity production is used for wastewater treatment.
Okay, so you're already using up electricity just to deal with it.
So to deal with our waste, we are consuming a relatively huge amount of electricity.
Right.
To power pumps, make air bubbles and everything. And in the wastewater treatment process, there is a step called anaerobic sludge, which is more or less a big bowl in which we bubble air to accelerate the process. And this consumes up to 50% of the electricity consumption.
Right.
So there is a lot of research in trying to find ways, other ways to do the same stuff. And where microbial fuel cells are good is because they are scalable to whatever needs. Right. And that's how the lab have discovered that they works very well with urine. Because yes, urine is urine, but it's very salty. And we are speaking about electrochemical reactions. So something that is very conductive and contains a lot of food, because we have very high level of carbon in urine. It's like it was the perfect and ideal environment.
So that's very convenient, isn't it? That humans are producing as a waste product the perfect fuel for your microbes.
So with the support from the Gates Foundation, we are now looking at the first application would be in the global south, where, especially in the rural environments, such things as electricity or good sanitation and good hygiene, they don't exist. And we do envisage microbial fuels as going into those communal pit latrines, whereby we could be modifying the human interface to be collecting the liquid, and in return the pit latrine is lit at night, which is not happening at the moment. And at the same time, the liquid that has been diverted is being treated to the microbial fuel cells, so then it could be used as a liquid fertilizer for the crops.
Nitrogen and phosphate are the two main components that wastewater treatment plants try to remove using a lot of energy. So if we treat urine in the house before it reaches the wastewater treatment plant, they will require less energy to treat the waste.
You've already got rid of the thing that they...
Of most of it.
Right.
And now the research in the field, not only us, try to recover that nitrogen and that phosphate to make fertilizers. So like this, we don't rely on the ones that are actually mined, especially the phosphate.
So basically, there's small amounts of nitrogen and phosphate that come ultimately from our food.
Yes.
That we don't want, and if you collect it, you can then use it for something else.
That's a nice thing. We concentrated. So the urine contains a lot of phosphate and a lot of nitrogen.
Right.
And the objective is that at the end, I wouldn't say we have drinkable water, because that would be going too far, but we have a liquid which contains much less carbon, much less nitrogen, and much less phosphate. And those things, they produce electricity. So imagine similar systems in wastewater treatment plant, that would do the same job, but won't require as much energy. So let's be very optimistic. We're going to save 1.5% of the national electricity production.
So you save the energy you were using, and you get a little bit back, which you can use for something else.
But the little bit back that you get, you can invest it to run the system. So therefore you have an energy neutral. That's what we try to get. But one technology alone is not enough. So that's it's the concept of biorefinery, where in fact you put technology back to back in order to cycle the elements, in order to have less impact on the environment.
What materials we are looking at are this kind of chassis here. We're using ceramic material, so flower pot material, and the electrodes we don't tend to use platinum or gold or other kind of noble metals. We tend to use carbon fiber veil. So it's almost like fabric, but it's made out of carbon fiber.
So these are very common atoms.
Very common atoms and very, very low cost. It's very easy to have a kind of meters long of carbon fiber veil.
It's such an amazing idea, and it's very elegant, and I can see that it opens up so many possibilities. It's so exciting.
In scaling up the technology, we first see it being utilized in refugee camps, so lit toilets in refugee camps, and with the appropriate engineering for scale up, lit refugee camps. Then through that, we see the technology deployed in different communities that are completely off-grid, serve the purpose of producing electricity and clean the wastewater and produce fertilizer. Once we were able to scale up the technology to that level, and these were the standalone systems that we envisage, we can then start seeing how we could be producing these microbial fuel cells to be part of structures, buildings all over the world, not just the developing economy world, but also the developed economy world. And therefore, households of the future anywhere in the world, the way that I'd like to see this going is that the fabric of those households will contain elements of the microbial fuel cells, all connected together, providing the energy for the household, maybe not alone, in combination with photovoltaics and other technology like piezoelectric. And so those households are self-sustainable, just like our robots from an energy perspective. But having this technology as part of the collective, those households will also be off-grid in terms of their household wastewater. And therefore, if there is a patch of land surrounding that household or a back garden, as we have, then the health of that garden is sustained from the household wastewater, which is then treated through these microbial fuel cells.
So this thing is for us a waste because it doesn't contain enough energy. For microbes, that's a fridge full of good stuff. We are doing a lot of cuisine stuff, so we are preparing our little mixture, we are washing a lot, and just to make sure that everybody in the household is happy.
So basically you're the chefs for the microbes.
Yes, we are. And they're the one dictating our life, in fact, because when they need food, whatever it is. So if we want to keep them alive, we have to run and come back to the lab and do what has to be done for them. So yeah,
brilliant.
Little dictators.
It's been really exciting to see this project, and it really highlights a trend that I'm certainly seeing more and more, which is that we are learning or relearning or learning something we should have seen a long time ago, which is that nature, all the millions of creatures that evolution has produced, are an amazing toolbox. They can do lots of things. And actually, if instead of fighting the natural world, we learn from it and learn to work with it and use those same principles, we're going to do so much better. And I love this project because of that, because it's got really long-term thinking and it uses the best of both. So I think it's been genuinely fabulous to be here, and it's such an exciting project to see. So that's the end of this episode, and as always, if you've enjoyed what we do, please look at the website, support us on Patreon if you can, look at all the amazing blogs and podcasts and all the rest of it that Fully Charged does. And if you have been, thank you for watching.
Well, if you enjoyed that episode, you're going to love this one. And this one, too, is very relevant to the topic. And also, if you want to subscribe to Fully Charged, which is a wonderful thing to do, really helps us, costs you nothing, you just click up there. It's really simple. And if you do want to support us a little bit more, you can have a look at the Patreon link. That's up there. Thank you.